My name is Marcus Hale, 32 years old, born and raised in the little town of Dry Hollow, the kind of place people joke about, saying even the devil himself would be too bored to stop by. The town has one main street, one shabby bar, an old church, and an endless supply of identical days. I never imagined my life would be anything more than unpaid bills and family arguments. I didn't believe in ghosts, or curses, or the stories kids whispered behind the schoolyard fence. That was before I became the night watchman of the Harlow Circus. Harlow's Wonder Circus used to be the pride of the whole region. 30 years ago, its posters were everywhere. Bright colours, exotic performers, roaring crowds beneath the big top. Then came the fire. One night, flames devoured the entire tent. People said the sky turned red, not like a sunset, but like a giant mouth opening above the town. They never found all the bodies. Some graves have names, others bear a simple line. For the souls who never made it out. The circus never reopened. The tent was never repaired, never torn down. It has been sitting there ever since, rotting at the edge of town like a huge, forgotten corpse. When I was a kid, adults always said, "Don't go near the circus after dark." I listened, but I didn't care. Years passed, money dried up, and one day the local security company told me they needed someone to watch a city-owned abandoned property. When the manager said the words Harlow's Wonder Circus, I actually laughed and asked what could possibly still be there. He didn't laugh, he just said the city wanted reports that teenagers kept sneaking in to film videos, leave graffiti, break things. My job would be simple. Be there from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Walk the grounds, and if I saw anything unusual, call him. $80 a night. I joked that I was probably the strangest thing they'd find there anyway. He didn't smile. He just placed a heavy metal key on the table. The handle was shaped like a smiling clown mask. "Tonight," he said. "You start tonight." I needed the money, so I took the key. That evening, I stood in front of the circus gates for the first time since childhood. The sun was sinking behind the trees, and the sky turned a pale, sickly orange. The tent roof, once red and white, was now a sagging patchwork of dirty fabric and burned holes. The rusty sign above the gate used to read Harlow's Wonder Circus. Now, only fragments of letters clung to the metal. The tall iron gate was decorated with silhouettes of elephants, lions, and acrobats, all chewed up by rust. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a deep, grinding click that sounded less like metal and more like a throat clearing after a long silence. Inside, the central plaza lay buried under tall, dry grass. A carousel lay on its side like a dead beast. Ticket booths leaned at odd angles. Torn flags fluttered weakly. There were no voices, no cars on the road, not even the distant hum of town life, only wind, threading its way through dead fabric and broken beams. I walked toward the big top, and the smell hit me. Old wood, soaked in humidity, cloth that had once burned and never quite cooled, rust, and that faint, sweet scent of caramelized sugar and butter, long spoiled and trapped in the walls. I pushed the heavy wooden door. It groaned in protest, the sound echoing into the darkness. Inside, It was almost completely black. My flashlight pushed a narrow tunnel through the dust, revealing scattered rows of seats, charred support beams, torn banners, and shredded ropes. The wooden floor creaked beneath my boots with each step, as if it had forgotten what footsteps sounded like. I had a rough map from the security company. The main stands, the central ring, a makeup room, a room for stuffed animals, a puppet room, backstage corridors, and an old control room that no longer worked. My instructions were simple. Every hour, walk the building, shine my light, make sure no one was inside, then return to the old ticket booth that served as my makeshift guard room. From 6 to 9, it was nothing but silence. I walked, I checked, I wrote on a clipboard. I almost convinced myself this would be an easy side job. Then, at exactly 9:17 p.m., I learned why no one wanted this shift. I was walking down a corridor that led toward the puppet room when my flashlight started to flicker. The beam stuttered, then steadied, then trembled again. From deep inside the darkness ahead of me, I heard it. Click, 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 a sound like wood tapping on wood. I told myself it was probably just something loose, a piece of broken board, maybe a rat knocking something over. Still, my heart sped up as I pushed open the door. The puppet room was small, with a low ceiling and faded floral wallpaper peeling off the walls. In the center stood a miniature wooden stage with a dusty red curtain at the back. Dozens of marionettes hung from the rafters, jesters, princesses, knights, animals, all suspended by thin, tangled strings. Their painted eyes shone in the flashlight's beam, tiny white dots in the dark. None of them moved. Click, click, click. The sound came again, this time from directly above. I tilted my flashlight upward. One marionette, a jester in a cracked red costume, was gently swaying. Its wooden face was split from the corner of its painted eye down to the mouth, the crack forming a crooked second smile. Its small wooden hands clapped softly together, palms touching just enough to create that light tapping. Wind, I muttered, though there were no open windows, no draft, no way air could be moving that hard in a sealed room. The jester's hands stopped. The whole room went quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. I took a step back, preparing to leave. Then a voice whispered behind me, "It's been so long since anyone opened the door." I turned sharply. Nothing had moved. And yet, everything had changed. The jester that had been hanging in the center of the stage now stood at the edge of it, standing. Its strings were still attached to the ceiling, but its body leaned forward like it was about to step down. Its hands were now placed neatly over its chest, as if greeting an audience. My heart thumped hard enough to hurt. I focused my flashlight on it. "Enough," I told myself aloud. "You're spooking yourself, Marcus." I stepped out of the room, not taking my eyes off the marionettes until the door shut. As soon as it did, something heavy dropped inside. Then, soft wooden footsteps walked toward the door. I didn't wait for anything else. I turned and walked away as calmly as I could, trying not to break into a run. Around 10:30, I reached the makeup and costume room. I told myself I just needed to get through one night. After that, I could tell the manager to find someone else. The costume room had rows of dressing tables, long tarnished mirrors, dusty wigs, and cracked jars of makeup. At the far end stood several racks of costumes. Red ringmaster coats, sparkly dresses for tightrope walkers, leotards for acrobats, clown outfits, and bulky animal suits, lions, rabbits, tigers, bears, each one scorched and discoloured. My flashlight swept across the floor beneath the racks and stopped. A bear costume lay crumpled on the ground like someone had stepped out of it in a hurry. The fur was burned in patches, revealing clumps of stuffing underneath. The detached bear head lay nearby, its stitched-on smile warped, threads torn, giving it a twisted grin. As I stared at it, the body of the costume rose and fell, slowly, like it was breathing. The bare head on the floor rotated, not rolling, but turning in place. Its plastic eyes caught the light and flashed faintly. "No," I whispered. "No!" The bear suit jerked. Then it stood up. There was no visible structure inside it, no arms, no legs, nothing holding it up, but it straightened anyway, wobbling slightly as if something invisible were learning how to stand again. I turned and ran. The sound it made as it followed was a horrible, dragging, scraping noise like a sack of wet fabric being pulled over wood, but fast, much faster than it had any right to be. "Marcus," it croaked, voice muffled and distorted as if echoing from deep inside thick padding. "The show isn't over." I threw myself out of the room, pulled the door closed, and shoved the bolt across. The door shook so violently I thought the hinges would rip free. Whatever was inside slammed against it again and again. I leaned my full weight into it until the pounding faded to silence. My hands were trembling, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I told myself I just needed to reach the main doors and leave. Money didn't matter anymore. My path back to the entrance led me through the main arena. The last time I'd stepped into that place, it had been a dead shell, dark, empty, and lifeless. This time, as I pushed aside the heavy curtain and stepped out, I realized I was not alone. Every seat was filled, not with people, with everything that should have been dead, broken, or forgotten. Puppets sat ramrod straight, heads tilted, porcelain dolls, their faces cracked, hands folded in their laps, stuffed animals with missing eyes, empty animal costumes propped upright, wax heads arranged atop crude stick bodies, clown masks and animal masks mounted on crude shapes of straw and cloth, row after row of them, all facing the center ring, all motionless, all present. My flashlight shook in my hand. Above me, old stage lights flickered on with a buzzing sigh. A dim yellow spotlight eased over the center of the sandy ring. Dust rose in slow swirls, glimmering like faint, sickly stars. Then the speakers crackled overhead. I knew the PA system hadn't worked in decades, yet a voice rolled through the arena, low and theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final show of Harlow's Wonder Circus." Izes. A rusty red curtain at the back of the ring stirred and slowly opened. At first, only a shadow stepped out, a tall shape wearing a long coat and a top hat, leaning on a cane. As it walked, colour bled into the darkness, like paint seeping across paper. Its coat turned dark crimson, its gloves became white, its boots glossy black, but its face never fully formed. It remained a blurred, melted mass, where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Still, I felt its gaze like a hand on my throat. It lifted its cane and pointed directly at me. "Night watchman," it said, voice echoing off the rafters. "You've finally joined us." Then another figure stepped through the curtain behind it. This time, my legs nearly gave out. It looked like me. Same height, same build, same way of standing, slightly leaning to the right. But the face was wrong, terribly wrong. It wasn't skin at all. It was a mask stitched together from scraps of other faces. The lower jaw of a wooden puppet, a shard of porcelain forehead, one painted clown eye, one hollow socket. Pieces of fake flesh, paper, and wood overlapped one another, forming a crude approximation of my features, distorted and misaligned. It wore a coat like mine. It had a cheap watch like mine. Even the tear in its left pant leg matched the one I'd gotten on a nail at the gate. It stepped down from the stage, coming closer until I could smell dry wood, burnt fabric, and stale stuffing coming off its body. "Night watchman," it said, in a voice that was almost mine, but stretched and warped as though pulled through a long tunnel. "Your turn to perform. To learn," in Inkellen. Behind it, the faceless ringmaster spoke again. "When the fire started," he said, "some escaped, some did not. But the performance was never allowed to end. We were still on stage, we were still in costume, we were still being watched. There are shows that cannot simply be stopped. Not for fire, not for death, not for time. The final performance has been going on ever since." The lights dimmed until only 2 spots remained, one on my duplicate, one on me. Everything else sank into shadow. The seats filled with puppets and masks melted into vague shapes, with only faint glints where their eyes should have been. Under my boots, the floor softened again. It no longer felt like wood. It felt like skin, pulsing faintly with each heartbeat of something large and buried deep below. My puppet twin raised its hand slightly. My chest turned to ice. It felt like invisible fingers slid through my ribs, closing around my heart. Images exploded in my mind, flames licking across canvas, people screaming, children crying, someone shouting, "Keep going, don't stop, they're still watching." It was a voice I had never heard in real life, but it echoed as if it had always lived in the back of my skull. I didn't know whether I was standing in the burned-out circus of the present or on the stage 30 years ago, in the very moment everything went wrong. Panic gave me only one instinct: run. I turned and ran. The exit I knew should have been there stretched away, corridor growing longer and longer. Doors appeared that hadn't existed before. Storage, makeup, high rope access, animal cages. Some doors were cracked open, their interiors swollen with darkness. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and steady, never closer, never farther. Wood tapping, fabric dragging, stuffing scratching the floor. I rushed past framed black and white photographs lining a hallway, images of performers frozen mid-act. In the jittery beam of my flashlight, some of their eyes blinked, lips twitched. In one photo, almost hidden in the background, I saw my own face among a group of circus workers, blurred but unmistakable. My lungs burned, and my vision wavered. I turned a corner and collided with a tall, unbroken mirror. I didn't break it. I just bounced off and fell to the ground. When I looked up, I didn't see my reflection. standing in the hallway. In the mirror, I saw the arena again. The stage, the ring, and in the center, my puppet double was bowing to the crowd of dead things. Every puppet clapped, every mask nodded, every stuffed head tilted in satisfaction. I screamed. The world snapped like a thread being cut. Then there was nothing. I woke up on my own couch. Morning light leaked in through the curtains. Birds chirped outside. I smelled coffee. For a few seconds, I thought it had all been a dream. Then I saw the security manager sitting in a chair across from me, holding a mug. "You gave me quite a scare," he said. "I tried calling you for over an hour. All I heard through the radio was screaming. When I drove out there, the circus doors were open. You were lying just outside on the ground, like you'd been running. No sign of anyone else, no intruders, just you, white as a sheet." "Izemd, I quit," I whispered. "I'm not going back." He watched me carefully. There was no surprise in his eyes. "You are the third guy to say that in 2 months," he said. "The first one heard voices. The second swore someone watched him from the stage every night. He said the circus wanted him to take a role." The manager stood up. "Place does strange things to people. Maybe it really doesn't like being empty." He reached for the door, then paused. "Oh, one more thing. When I found you, there was an ink stamp on your wrist. You know, like those old admission stamps they used to use at events. I wiped most of it off. Funny thing though, that kind of ink shouldn't still exist after 30 years. He left with a shrug, and the door closed behind him. I sat there in silence. I looked down at my wrist. A faint circle was still visible, with a few crooked lines inside, faded but real. If I squinted, I could make out the shape of a letter. It looked like an H. I slipped my hand into my pocket to steady my nerves and felt something stiff. I pulled it out and stared. It was a circus ticket. Real paper, yellowed edges, faded red lettering. Harlow's Wonder Circus, final night. Guest entry only. Under the word guest, a name was written in old smudged ink. Marcus Hale. I hadn't put anything in that pocket. The only papers I'd touched that evening were the security forms at the office. My fingers went numb. The ticket slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. The television flickered on by itself. I hadn't touched the remote. Static filled the screen, a grey snowstorm of noise, crackling, buzzing. Then the image stabilized just enough for me to see the outline of the circus arena. The center ring was bathed in pale yellow light. A single figure stood there, bowing. It was my puppet twin, or maybe not a twin anymore. As I stared, he lifted his head. He looked straight at the camera, straight through it, straight into my living room, straight into me. His mouth moved, but the sound didn't come from the TV. It came from behind me, from the dark hallway leading deeper into my house. "Don't make us choose someone else, Marcus," the voice said softly. "The show cannot end just because you want to sleep." From the hallway, I heard it. Clack, clack, clack. Soft wooden footsteps, like a marionette learning to walk. On the TV, the camera panned slowly around the arena. The seats were empty, waiting. The spotlight stayed on the center. There was room for one more performer. The circus had been closed for 30 years, but the final show had never ended. Somehow, without knowing it, I had already accepted my ticket inside.